My name is Riewer. This is my first solo show. It's called No Form, No Shape. It's based on a poem I wrote after a night out that I kind of just wrote down into my notes app. It just felt right at the moment and kind of encapsulates the way I feel about the night, ambiguity, and being a painter in a time where many things are changing quite quickly. This is like a completely new body of work that I've made. It consists of many different paintings, but also quite central is animation work that I call frames. It's a series of 40 paintings that I've done in acrylic and oil. It's kind of a double translation of the original video I took. It's of a friend of mine who's dancing. This 4-second clip, I compromised to 10 frames a second. I traced it on the 40 panels, and I tried to use my painterly gesture to bring movement in, sometimes being quite strict with what direction the light is coming from, and the play on colors just comes back. So it forced me to question every single frame of the video and how important it was. On the other side of the room, you can see the 40 paintings in their entirety. Here you see the physical movement of the video, and this movement and the color schemes of the night kind of come back in all the paintings. In the theme of the night and a musical rhythm, we have the second DJ painting I've made this year. This is also part of the atmosphere I want to convey, this musical, rhythmic sense. I feel like music for me is the highest form of art because you cannot question it, or you don't demand for it to be questioned. So yeah, I had this dark photo of this DJ that I also tried to bring this musical rhythm back. I mean, I don't remember the music, I don't have a video of the performance, but I have this blurry photo and I tried to connect through color to this moment. The same goes with this photo of my friend with the sunglasses. I mean, it's an accessory, but it reflects the light from outside, so then it becomes like a light object. And these reflections and transparencies also come back through the other rooms. In this room, we have the oldest painting. It's one of the first paintings that are based on reference photographs made from a broken printer. So you can kind of see this double image formed and this block of black. So the printer ink didn't really come through. It was a black and white image of a hotel and the reflection on the street. This is kind of where my obsession started with using broken images. I mean, as a painter, using photography is quite challenging sometimes because a photograph can give you so much. So using images that are taken in darkness or that are blurry or that are printed using a broken printer, I have to use my painterly brain and kind of build up what is missing. And I do this through kind of like an emotional exchange with color and the brushes I use. A photo is usually not enough. I want to see what I can bring out of a photograph. I mean, this is like an age-old question. Ever since the invention of photography, painters have to find a way to add to a motif. And for me, this goes through color, but color is kind of the first foot into this abstraction. So a gesture is the same. I mean, here in this animation work where I did the 40 frames, you can see that I started filling in shapes with a brush in a horizontal way. They're obviously not perfect horizontal stripes, but I tried to kind of mimic this printerly gesture, and then afterwards other gestures come in. So it's rhythmic, but it's also mechanical. How can I be organic and mechanical in this movement? So if you see the video that's created by showing these frames one after the other, there's physical movement from the change in frames, but here you can see every single gesture and decision I took from one to the next. Some gestures come back, some change slightly, but how do I bring movement into something that's standing still? In the end, I don't just make a visual thing, I make a gestural thing, it's a process, and how do I show this process? I want that my decisions are visible. I like to say that paint is pigment, sometimes it's rocks ground up, it's dirt, it's kind of like a child playing. So if you go close, you can see these accidental moments of the things just rearranging on the panel or on the canvas. And that's this tension I like. And this tradition, I mean, the impressionists, they did it perfectly, obviously. The paint was kind of the main actor in the painting. this kind of nightly, nocturnal swoosh of emotion and color and ambiguity comes back in many of these paintings. That comes from the reference images that are sometimes blurry or dark, that doesn't give me enough information, and then I have to use my memory and kind of how I feel to complete it. Many of the paintings in the show work with the background and foreground and they kind of blur into each other, where atmosphere is kind of king in the painting. And the glass does this kind of perfectly. It only exists because of the interaction with the backgrounds. And here I went a step further and I didn't want the painting to end and this gesture to end. So I took the painting and the background and the foreground, they live on again where the gesture continues on the wall. Quite an essential question as a painter to know how you fill in a shape. I mean, if we think about the visual world as blocks of color next to each other, a painter does the same. I start with colors that maybe seem wrong, but then I ask why are they wrong, or how can I surround them with other colors or with a gesture that makes it seem coherent. And this is one of the later paintings I made, and it still focuses on this horizontal, vibrant areas where the shapes in the painting don't really border themselves. I mean, from afar you can see what shapes are cut off, but most of them are kind of just floating over each other, next to each other, not touching each other, where you see the underneath. So I want to keep the paintings fresh, and I don't want to suffocate them by reducing my gesture to this horizontal gesture, or this quite childish, direct gesture too. I mean, this light that the car is shining onto this container, it's immaterial, but if you use this childish gesture, you're like physicalizing this nothingness. I mean, that's what painters do. We paint what is kind of not visible and materialize light and darkness. It's more atmospheric than anything. And this has to do with color and the way I build it up. The reference photograph was extremely vague. There were so many reflections everywhere. So through the process of using this like printed out, compromised photograph, I have to see what is necessary to project what I want, but to its bare minimum. Again, a night scene that's quite colorful, but there's so many different kinds of darkness too. I mean, sometimes we don't realize, but there's nuance in darkness too. This photo, I knew I wanted to paint it. It's the last painting made for the exhibition. It's a view out of a plane window, but it's very blurry from the movement of the plane. Yeah, and this is all about light and the shapes of these intricate streets, which I couldn't all paint. So I measured and I saw what planes of color could go where, but I wanted it to look like it's vibrating. So I really simplified all these intricate streets and highways and fields into planes of color until it gave me enough to the point where you can kind of sense this nocturnal energy and you could figure out what it is, but you don't have to. It's more about color and what connection you make. But I don't try to make like some sort of philosophical standpoint on reality. I mean, when you talk about painting, you automatically kind of have to talk about reality. I mean, you're presenting something visual to the world, and visual reality is often considered universal, but I mean, just colors, like everyone sees the same color the same way, or if we just teach people the same words to talk about the same colors. So yeah, it just comes from a physical impulse of where, through the process, I kind of find truths about how I perceive moments emotionally, visually, and in a painterly way. But whether that translates to the viewer, I mean, many times they border on abstraction, so I feel like it's the viewer who can decide to go into the abstract moments or just look at the motif as a whole. But this in-between space I find quite interesting because it talks about, I mean, something historical, figurative painting, and abstraction, which is still quite new, about vision. It's a space I feel comfortable in. I do not have to say I'm a figurative painter, I'm an abstract painter. I'm swimming on this border between the two. So I don't want to limit myself in that. I just want to make paintings that feel honest and truthful, and whether that's more abstract or not depends on the painting too, or where I'm in life currently.